Joining me from London, Daniel Hannan, member of the European Parliament. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
London stands with Orlando, a touching tribute that we are seeing overseas. What are you seeing from there? How is this terrorist attack being perceived there?
Well, it's in the same way as everywhere. I mean, it's a monstrous attack on civilian people.
And there's obviously been a political response here in the United States. We're obviously in an election year. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, the presumptive nominees of both parties, have been very outspoken. Both gave speeches yesterday tackling immigration and gun control. It's obviously become a political issue here.
The one time when you shouldn't rush to conclusions, either about gun control or about migration, is in the immediate aftermath of an atrocity when feelings are running high. These are all perfectly legitimate issues, indeed important issues that ought to be debated, but they need to be debated coolly and calmly and rationally. And with people feeling the way they feel now in the US and indeed globally, now would be the one time not to legislate.
And I also want to get to this because the French president, Francois Hollande, warning that France faces a high threat from terrorism after the stabbing of a police officer and his wife. How would leaving the European Union guard Britain against terrorist attacks?
It would mean that we could deport people if we think that they are a threat to our security, even if they're EU nationals. It's a very difficult thing to do at the moment. It's possible, but it's very, very difficult. So, for example, there was a hate preacher here who was notorious, called Abu Hamza. We tried to deport his daughter-in-law after she had served a criminal conviction, and we were told that that was impossible by the European Court, even though she was not a British national or a European national, but because she had a son who was a British national and therefore an EU citizen. She was the sole carer, it was said, for this son. I think the taxpayer was the sole provider for the son, as far as I could tell, and therefore she was allowed to remain in this country. Now, in a necessarily uncertain world, it must be safer to take back control so that we can mitigate the risks ourselves.
Okay, interesting response. And we were also looking at this morning. The push for Britain to leave the European Union seems to be gaining traction. We were talking about the polling earlier. The New Times YouGov poll putting the Leave camp in a 7-point lead now, and publications are also coming out in support of an exit, but fears of a Britain exit are shaking global markets. We've seen a lot of volatility in recent days leading up to this. What effect could the decision have on European and global markets, in your view?
Markets hate uncertainty. They hate elections. You can set your watch by it. Stock exchanges fall and currencies fall in the run-up to any election or any change, and they always recover the day after, regardless of the outcome. And I think that'll happen on this occasion. It's important to understand that we're not, those of us who want to leave the European Union, we're not talking about walking away from the markets. We're certainly not talking about pulling up the drawbridge. Britain is an internationalist country. We're engaged with friends and allies on every continent. This is just about taking back control of who makes laws in this country, and doing it in a way that I think is reflective of public concerns around Europe. I think there are a lot of other countries where people also feel, as people in Britain do, that their politicians have pushed ahead with this project without popular consent. And so I hope we'll very quickly be able to move to an agreed new settlement where we remain in the single market, but we're outside the political union.
Do you worry about destabilizing financial markets if there is a vote to leave the European Union and taking an economic situation in the region which is already pretty dismal and making it even worse by creating more uncertainty about the future of Europe?
Well, it's Europe that has created that mess. It's the single currency and the obsession with keeping it together regardless of the cost to the people who use it, that has created the mess in the first place. Over the last 10 years, the Eurozone is the only bit of the planet that hasn't experienced any growth at all. And so Britain stepping back from that exhausted, declining, collapsing Eurozone and reforging our links with more opulent markets overseas, not least English-speaking common law countries to which we're tied by language and law, by habit and history. That surely, as well as being in our interest and in the long-term interest of our economy, creates a space where there can be a democratic renewal in other European countries too if they follow suit.
Well, so you're clearly in the Leave camp. How confident are you right now that you're going to win this vote?
I'm the worst predictor of elections ever, right? Even for a politician. You know, I know in America you're always supposed to say you're winning, and if you don't say that, it's a terrible gaffe. Me, I've never really got that that convention. I mean, the polls have been 50-50. Either side could win. And I think if we do win, you know, it won't be a radical change. It'll be a gradual divergence. Britain will begin to pursue a different trajectory towards the rest of the world, away from the world's only failing trade bloc. But it won't be sudden. It will be in agreement, I hope, with our friends and allies. It's very important after this process, whatever happens, that we remain on good terms with the countries which are our immediate neighbours.
So we know that you support the Brexit, and you've talked about the long-term economic stability. But what about the shorter-term economic stability? Prime Minister Cameron has said that it could be dangerous for people's pensions, that there could be a squeeze on defence spending. Others who are against the Brexit have raised that issue. The uncertainty while negotiating trade agreements. How do you square with those arguments?
Yes, he's also said that it will cause a war. Donald Tusk, the president of the European Council, said it will be the end of Western civilization. You know, we're told it will mean famine and plague and locusts and frogs.
Okay, but what about people's pensions? But what about people's pensions?
Phased, gradual repatriation of our lawmaking powers and the ability to sign our own trade deals with countries outside Europe. Now, how is that such a big deal? I know that politicians and markets generally like stability. I know that they hate change. But the stability at the moment is the stability of stagnancy, the stability of zero growth in Europe. It's the stability of a basically undemocratic racket which suits the corporatists and the big mega banks and the multinationals, but doesn't suit the economy as a whole. It's bad for innovation, it's bad for startups. We can do better. And all of this talk will very quickly evaporate when people reconcile themselves to the new reality, if, as I hope, my countrymen vote to leave next week.
So your take is that people, the average person at home that has to think about their pension, that has to think about their financial security, that if they sort of hang on for the ride, ultimately it's going to be a better deal?
Absolutely. Look, I'm a member of the European Parliament. I'm in a very well-paid job with large tax-free expenses. If we vote to leave, I will be looking for work. So I wouldn't be urging people to fire me if I weren't convinced that the economy as a whole will prosper as the result of our leaving, and therefore I hope that there'll be some job openings for newly unemployed members of the European Parliament, maybe even doing something a little bit more useful than sitting in Brussels and regulating everybody else.
We've got a hard out coming. Daniel Hannan, thank you.